For people like myself who've been following the entertainment industry and a lot of the behind the scenes stuff for some time now, it has appeared that a lot of Hollywood studios have been kind of moving away from their DEI programs, or at least not being as overt at promoting it. And this is frankly just for practical measures, because they understand that when they start leaning into that and some other stuff, Disney is a prime example of companies doing that sort of thing, that it really wasn't good for their bottom line. Some of their movies they've been putting out have been failing at the box office, while other ones like Inside Out 2, for instance, was one that they deliberately made efforts to not make it look like the main character was gay, kind of moving away from the DEI elements that they had initially planned for it. And as a result, or maybe not the result that it made over $1 billion globally, but I think it is a contributing factor to it. But now we're hearing about other Hollywood studios trying to get away from their DEI programs. But now they're saying it's because of Donald Trump and the executive order that he has at the federal level for government agencies and how they're not allowed to push that sort of thing anymore. In 2023, Warner Brothers Discovery launched its Diversity Digest, a quarterly update on the company's DEI efforts. The first installment highlighted Latino representation in Blue Beetle and home renovation show Rico to the Rescue. But after regular updates in 2024, the digest went silent after the election of President Trump. Last week, the feature was dropped from the company's DEI page, along with Warner Brothers Discovery's commitments to equity and diversity outreach, as the company narrows its focus to inclusion. The move came as Trump has sought to stamp out DEI programs at the federal level and threaten civil and criminal investigation of private companies. And some people will say, like, well, how can he actually do this? Because controlling what company or what the federal government does is one thing. Can he actually really mandate what private companies do? Well, in essence, for this sort of thing, yeah, because people don't realize it, but a lot of the DEI programs that have existed for some time now have, well, been illegal to actually do. They violate the Civil Rights Act, and they're not allowed to do this. And a lot of people have been able to sue as a result of them kind of discriminating against people. Some people, like if a person is not hired because they're white, or if they know that that's the reason why they weren't hired, well, then there is grounds for lawsuits, because you're not allowed to discriminate based on race, even if you are the dominant race within society. And in the past, I think a lot of companies have gotten away with this because they understood that really no one's going to do anything about it. But now that you have the federal government actually saying, no, we're going to no longer allow this sort of thing to exist, now we're starting to see that some companies are going to have to change focus, because even if they've already kind of been moving in that direction, they understand that they have to, if they haven't got started already, they have to right now, because the federal government is not going to let them get away with that kind of stuff anymore. Last month, the Federal Communications Commission opened an investigation of Comcast, the parent of NBC Universal and MSNBC, for possibly pursuing individual forms of discrimination under the banner of DEI. As I said, DEI is discrimination, just in another form. Bullying is causing a lot of companies to reassess, says Verna Myers, former head of inclusion at Netflix. Most smart companies are just trying to figure out how far this is going to go. They're trying to stay out of the crosshairs. For its part, a spokesperson for Comcast said the company will cooperate with the FCC to answer their questions, adding, "For decades, our company has been built on foundation of integrity and respect for all of our employees and customers. But if you've been pushing DEI, then you really haven't done it." But still, it seems like a lot of companies feel compelled that they have to kind of turn their back on this sort of thing. Now, personally, like I already highlighted, how Disney has started to kind of abandon this in a small way. Other companies have been doing the same over the last couple of years because, like I said, they realize that it's not good for their business to push this sort of thing and to broadcast that this is what they're in fact doing. And I think a lot of this stuff coming from the Trump administration is more or less some companies taking the excuse, because there's people out there, executives at these studios, that they may have not really been true believers in this cause. I think a lot of companies and studios out there were just thinking, well, I mean, this is the new trendy thing, and if we want to try to bank on it, or we want to stay with the times, and we need to push and lean in this direction as well, because they just thought that's the best thing for their bottom line. So they hired on a bunch of people to work at their companies for this sort of thing. And as a result, the companies have been pushing this. And then they saw that it really wasn't good for their bottom line. But at that point, they were kind of scared of their own employees, because they're worried, like, well, if we fire them or do something, they're just going to scream discrimination, and then we have to face a lawsuit and a lot of negative PR. So I think a lot of these studios have been almost just looking for an excuse to abandon this sort of thing. And this is basically just kind of giving it to them, because they're, like I said, they just wanted to make the most money possible. They thought this was the new thing. Turns out that wasn't the case. And now they're finally breathing a sigh of relief that they can actually get rid of this and be like, oh, it's not our fault. This was coming from someone else. Just, pass the blame on to someone else who is responsible for getting rid of this sort of thing. And if that's how they want to play it, that's fine, I guess. However, I do think there are some companies out there who were led by people who I would say are true believers in that cause and aren't necessarily willing to abandon it just yet. In fact, even before the election happened, we heard stories about how this isn't necessarily only just relegated to Hollywood, but I think Hollywood kind of applies to this sort of thing too. Corporate DEI programs recoil and rebrand as pressure mounts. This is from January. So before Trump came in, some companies were actually just trying to change the name of their DEI programs, or at least dissolving those entities within the company, because they're no longer needed. They hire on people in order to try to teach the rest of the company how to push DEI and other things like that. And after it was pretty much cemented itself within that corporate culture of that company, and they hired on enough people to actually pursue that sort of thing, well, then those DEI specific roles in the company aren't necessarily needed anymore, because that's just the company itself. There's also this: DEI is evolving, not ending. How top companies are rebranding inclusion. And this is kind of what I was saying about how it's evolved to the point where it's no longer needed, or they just rebrand the name of it. So it's not a DEI officer or something working at a company. It's whatever, some other label that they're going to attach to it, even though their role is essentially the same thing. Disney is rebranding its employee resource groups, but not eliminating DEI outright. They have eliminated some of the stuff from their website, but not necessarily everything entirely. And as I pointed out with Inside Out 2, it's something that they won't necessarily lean as heavy on within a lot of their movies, especially movies that are meant for family audiences. But I don't think I would be willing to expect them to get rid of it entirely. I think they're going to try to still push it within their films. They're just not going to be as overt about it. Maybe just try to be more discreet, especially if it is a movie that's under a microscope that a lot of people are paying attention to. Then I think they're going to try to find some other ways to get around it without abandoning it entirely. For its part, a spokesperson. Okay, I already talked about that. But the Comcast experience isn't one other media conglomerates want to repeat. Among the companies changing their approach to DEI are the Walt Disney Company, which recently announced that it was ending Reimagine Tomorrow, and that's what I meant, where they got rid of that from their website. An initiative intended to promote stories from underrepresented communities, and it's not alone. Amazon and just last week, Paramount and Warner Brothers Discovery walked back programs that embedded DEI in hiring and promotion practices because it's illegal and they can't get away with that anymore. Disney has played an outsized role in the culture wars, so its decision was particularly thrilling for conservative America First Legal, which has launched numerous efforts to challenge corporate DEI policies, hailed the move as a major victory. Disney has finally backed down after years of treating people differently based on the characteristics like race and sex, says Will Scolinos, counsel for the organization. For supporters of DEI policies, it was hard to tell if Disney was truly rolling back its efforts or just trying to lay low. Either way, it's clear that the political climate has shifted. And I think there's some companies that are turning on these sort of things. The political climate shifted not just because there's a new person in the White House, but it's because a lot of studios, like I said, thought that this was the next thing. They thought this is what the people wanted. And they're like, they hear online people speaking out against this sort of thing and saying that they don't want it. But they're like, well, those are just a vocal minority, or they're not the majority of the audience. The majority of the audience wants this sort of thing. But this last election, it was actually a pretty big campaign point for Donald Trump to get rid of this sort of thing in the public and in private sector. And that won out. So I think some companies are realizing that this isn't necessarily the best thing to lean into because this isn't the target audience, or maybe the majority of the audience isn't in favor of these sort of things. So maybe we shouldn't have those. And like I said, some of them are going to try to abandon it, but other ones are still going to continue on with it, just under a different name, a little bit more discreet. So I do think it is important for people to understand that if you're actually in this culture war fight for this sort of thing, it's not over. It is a victory when they have to feel like they can't just be as loud about it. But still, there are people out there who are going to try to push it. And maybe right now they're just going to try to lay low and regroup. So just be aware of that because it's still going to continue on for some time now, long after Donald Trump leaves office. But let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. And also, if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news. And don't forget to click the like button and share this video out there because it really helps out with the channel. Thank you.